What's believed to be the nation's biggest class action is underway in the federal court in Melbourne. About 34,000 ANZ customers are suing the bank over what they claim are unfair penalty fees. Their lawyers say it's an important test case, one that could affect the way the ANZ and other big banks do business. Reporter Jeff Waters has the details.
At the federal court in Melbourne, tens of thousands of bank customers are hoping to get their own back. The ANZ is the first bank being challenged for what lawyers are calling exorbitant penalties imposed on customers who, for instance, are late paying off credit cards or slip into overdraft. They're arguing that, under the law, the bank only has the right to recoup its losses and not make further profit.
The thrust of our case is that the client can be charged a reasonable sum that actually reflects the cost to the bank of dealing with these things.
It's pretty obvious how the public recognise these fees. The question now is how a court categorises these fees.
And that's central to the argument. Lawyers are reaching back in time to try to prove banks are only allowed to charge reasonable fees and not penalties. The lawyers in this case are relying on centuries-old English law to help them define the relationship between banks and their customers. Some of the cases they were citing happened decades before the first fleet arrived in Australia. But it's the future that will concern all the other banks. There are plans to take a dozen more to court if this case succeeds, and there are possible ramifications outside the banking sector as well.
There are obvious implications if we win on late fees for other industries that have charged these things, from, well, utility companies, for example.
An ANZ spokesman says any fees it charges are for services provided by the bank. And he says this is just the first of a number of hearings which may not be fully resolved until next year. Jeff Waters, ABC News.